You're listening to the Salty Sex Cast with Mariah and friends. Minimize the fear. Expand your awareness.
Hello, all you sexy souls. It's Mariah. Welcome back to another episode of the Salty Sex Cast. I have Allison Jayne with me today. She's an author, a psychotherapist, and an EFT tapping practitioner. She's going to chat with us about dating after divorce, what it's like, what to watch for, especially for women, because her book is Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. So I'm so excited to have you, Allison. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, maybe we start where it all started. You got divorced, and maybe that probably had some, crisis feelings, and that turned into you're obviously making something of that experience. So, tell me a little bit about how you got started and why your journey took you this direction.
So what happened is when I went through my divorce, I realized that even though I had been a psychotherapist for over 20 years at that point, I knew a lot about individual psychology and mental health for individuals. I really didn't know very much about couple psychology and what sort of worked or didn't work relationship wise and relationally. And so I guess it's just sort of my habit that when, something goes wrong in life, I want to solve the problem. So I I took it upon myself to educate myself. I thought, well, I didn't know a lot about this, and my marriage obviously didn't work out. So I don't want to repeat that pattern. So I'm going to kind of take a deep dive into this and do some research on this aspect that I hadn't been formally trained on in any way. So I read a lot of books and articles and did some research. And then simultaneously, while I was doing that, I was also dating. I was also making friends with a lot of other single women post-divorce. I sort of jokingly call them my goddess posse because over the
Yeah.
neighbor, my friends called me the divorce whisperer. They were like, "There's always some divorce woman crying in your backyard." So for some reason, I just sort of attracted in these divorced women in the community, and they'd say, "Oh, go talk to Allison," and so I just sort of gathered a group of single women around me, and we were all going through this experience together of, first sort of recovering from the divorce and then starting dating and then the roller coaster of dating. And so I took my experience along with my girlfriend's experience. I had some single clients at that same time who were later in life, midlife single clients, from their experience and from all this research I did. And I sort of pulled it all together and I started to formulate principles in my mind about, well, if I was going to teach somebody how to date after divorce, this is how I would do it. And I thought, my whole life, people have told me, you should write a book, because I am a storyteller, love telling stories. And so, of course, when the pandemic hit, I was like, here's the time. I'm going to write my book.
Another crisis on a
Right.
journey.
I was like, I have so much time on my hands to write this book. I even knew the title. I wanted to call it Date Like a Goddess. And then, probably like a lot of listeners out there, I thought I was going to do all this stuff in the quarantine. And I don't know, I just didn't do it. I think the most I walked out with was an outline. so, so then about 2 years later, this month last year, I was having sort of a little bit of a anxiety. I was going into my 49th year and thinking, oh my gosh, I turned 50 next year. I'm nervous about this. And so I did some EFT tapping, which I know we're going to talk more about, with my mentor on what is it that's bothering me. And what came up was that I felt like there were things I wanted to accomplish before I turned 50, one of which was write the book. And
Yeah.
so I decided that in April, and I wrote it all summer. And found a great publisher and was published in the fall. And I'm not even 50 yet. So
Allison, congratulations. That's massive to feel
yeah.
that, just to go there. Um, and I know that feeling right after a divorce where your whole world implodes. There's just no direction. The identity, the full person you thought you were, you have to reimagine and really start there. Who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? And that's a lot. Plus, then going to date on top of that, especially if I feel like there's two kinds of separations in my head. So please correct me if I'm wrong, or divorces. There's one where the partner that's not you kind of drops a bomb on you. Something happens, whether it's infidelity or gambling. I mean, I'm just thinking of these crazy things, like this other person you didn't know. And then it's like, I can't trust you. And then it just slowly starts cracking, and things start crumbling. Or there's the one where it's like, I don't know who I am. I have slowly chipped myself away, and I'm no longer the person I want to be. I don't like who I am with you. I don't think you're helping me thrive as a human being. I need to separate from, maybe it's not toxic, but it's not well either. It's not healthy. And so that's kind of, so there's like these big bombs that throw, and then there's this epiphany one day of like, I don't want to be here. This isn't who I am. So I feel like there's kind of two in my head that I can imagine, but I don't know if you have experienced or seen or heard of different other types of divorces, because I feel like dating back will look different for those two paths.
Yes, yes and no. I think that in some ways that there are differences. I would say from sort of the biggest difference, of course, is that some people are actually getting divorced excited, like looking forward to dating
Mm,
and to sort of trying again or starting over. And, in the latter group, I would say that's more that, but not always. And even in that category. And then I would say when you're in that first group of your partner maybe dropping this bomb, you can experience a certain amount of sort of shell shock
mm,
before you're even ready to
mhm,
date. But I think that what's common between both situations is that when you're dating again after a divorce, you have two real big things in your mind. One, I don't ever want to be a divorced person again.
No one goes into a relationship hoping it ends in divorce.
Right, right, right. And I remember one of my good girlfriends telling me early on when we got divorced literally about 2 weeks apart. And she said to me regarding dating at one point, she said, I just feel like there's so much more pressure this time around because nobody wants to screw it up a second time.
High stakes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, feeling that.
And that I think
Oh,
is common among both groups. Um, and I think that that is a big deal. And then I think the other piece that is more of an issue for women dating post divorce than earlier in life is most people have, if especially if you've been in a marriage for, a relatively long time, I would say 8 to 20 plus years is probably long enough to experience this, where you might realize that you did lose yourself in the relationship,
mm-hmm.
even in the situation where maybe it was your partner who wanted the divorce and surprised you or something. But I really don't know many women who don't have sort of an awareness of, wow, I started to just kind of go along with the program
Mm-hmm.
and just be who they wanted me to be, to maybe keep the peace or make things smooth, or just sort of lost themselves in the relationship. And so I think there's a real intense fear going back out and dating again post divorce that I might repeat this pattern.
Yes. Yes. And feeling like I have to hold every side of me now that I finally have gotten it back and I have labeled it and I know who I am and what I want. I am so firm in boundaries, almost to the point of aggression, or I'm not even going to consider your needs and your boundaries. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yes,
So I
been
think it
through that.
and so I think it's a sneaky, almost like subconscious pattern that a lot of women aren't even really aware of. And so they think at a conscious level, yes, of course I want to date again, and of course I want a partner. I want someone to grow old with. I don't think there's anyone out there who would say that's not what they want. But at the same time, at a subconscious level, if your subconscious is going, whoa, whoa, this seems scary, we could lose ourselves again, or we could have this rupture again, then you might actually be dating from a place of sort of a foot on the gas, foot on the brake at the same time
Mm,
in your consciousness, and you don't even realize it because it's happening at such a deep, unconscious level for you. So I think that can be a problem that is unique. I don't think women necessarily have that in their teens or 20s or even early 30s. So
yeah,
I think that's a unique post-divorce dating problem.
I would agree. And I've seen that. I've seen it in friends that are going through it right now, and kind of um, because I am a coach, a board certified coach, I do have clients that I also see some of these things too happening. And they're like, I've healed, or I'm working with a therapist to heal through some of that other thing. I want to go, where do I want to go now? Who am I now? And they're trying to uncover the future. And we're walking through like what goals feel good, what direction feels good. And so that's why I love that you've brought up tapping and EFT, um, because that's something that you've experienced yourself on how it helps uncover that mystery of we feel the need. There's some type of magnetism bringing us to that direction, that path, that goal, that whatever it is. Um, and I try to use different words so it doesn't sound so woo, because it really is real and
Yeah.
measurable. It just sounds so different. So I know some people can be like, not my cup of tea. But when they start, grasping it in a different language, or seeing it in a different way, it's really cool to watch that uncover. I still remember being in school and we did a unit on tapping, and there were folks in the class, they were like, oh, this is so silly. Like, why are we doing this? And it's just like, you can see people who just would not be open to it, and then those who were. And it was just such a massive difference. So please explain for those who have no clue what tapping is, or have never experienced or heard it or seen it. Um, what does this practice look like, feel like, entail?
Okay, so EFT tapping it's technically called the emotional freedom technique, but most people have heard of it as tapping. And what it is stimulating acupressure points, specific points on the body that will, when stimulated by being tapped on, will send a calming signal to the fight or flight center of your brain. And it essentially shuts it off, and it allows your brain to function in a more holistic way. So, what a lot of people don't realize is when we get highly emotional,
Mm,
uh, angry, upset, those strong negative emotions, the blood from our brain literally drains from our frontal lobe, and it concentrates in the mid and hindbrain. And the mid and hindbrain are sort of our reptilian, our older, our emotional and reptilian center. So that's the part of the brain that basically makes sure you breathe every day and your heart beats, and also controls in your emotion, or is produces your emotions. Basically, your emotions are processed in that part of your brain. And the frontal lobe is where our logic, reason, and judgment is all processed and happening. So you can imagine if the blood drains from there and is all concentrated there, you literally can't think reasonably. You can't logic and use good judgment. That's just a fact. So it's the reason why when you get scared, suddenly you can't think really straight. That's why.
mhm,
And so when you do something to calm your body at a physical level, it will actually start to send the blood back to the frontal lobe. And and take that sort of intense concentration out of the amygdala, midbrain, hindbrain center. So what is interesting is I remember many years ago, I took a self-defense course, and she said, if you clutch your hands down by your side and go in and out with your hands, clutching, making fists in and out down by your side, it pumps the blood back out to your hands and feet, but also to your frontal lobe. And then you'll think more clearly.
Yeah. Because as soon as you have a bioresponse, if your amygdala senses some type of threat, emotional threat, it doesn't even have to be a physical threat. It can be emotional threat, anything. All of that blood goes to your center, your core, to keep you alive, all those core organs. And then that's why, getting blood back out is really important, and it helps with that circulation. That's really cool. I've never heard of the clenching.
I know.
I'll have to try that, especially after like an adrenaline rush or something that's like, okay, we're still alive.
Right. And so the tapping actually works in the same way. And you're tapping on specific meridian endpoints from Chinese medicine, from acupuncture. And people always ask me, well, if I just tapped anywhere, would it help? And the research is very clear that no, that it is these specific meridian endpoints that have this calming effect. And so similar to the clenching of the fist, the tapping is going to let that blood flow back to your frontal lobe. But what's really cool about doing the tapping is you actually create a new neural pathway to whatever it is you're thinking about. So if you're thinking about something that it causes an intense emotion, let's say you're thinking of a particular aspect of your divorce, maybe something that your ex-spouse said to you that really still fires you up, and you're thinking about it and you tap on it long enough, it extinguishes the emotion from that memory and it creates a new neural pathway hooking that memory to your frontal lobe. You still remember it, but you won't have the physiological response of like the, tense body and the sweaty palms and the bug eyes. You won't have that, and you won't have the emotion. Because what's cool about our central nervous system is it's either in its sympathetic nervous system or it's parasympathetic. It's an on-off switch in a way. You can't be in both at the same time. And your parasympathetic is that relaxed state, alpha brainwave state, when maybe you've experienced it if you meditate, or for yogis out there, shavasana. It's that sort of drifty state, brainwave state you're in right before you go to sleep. And so when you stimulate these acupressure points, they've shown, because they've had people in EEGs, they've shown that it very quickly puts people in the alpha brainwave state. They've taken blood and saliva for people pre and post. They've shown that it
cortisol.
Yeah, lowers cortisol, the stress hormone level, very quickly. And so what you're doing is you're moving yourself. If you were thinking about something that puts you in your sympathetic nervous system, that gets you kind of fired up, and then you tap on it, it moves the central nervous system into the parasympathetic, and it literally extinguishes that neural pathway that was hooking the incident to your fight or flight. And then you no longer want to fight about it. In fact, it just reminded me of kind of a funny story. I was on a first date a few years back now with a guy who asked me what I did. And I was like, well, I do this kind of quirky thing. Do you want me to show you so you can? And I should back up and say, before that, he said to me, do you know that guy over there at the bar, at the other end of the bar? I was like, no. And he was like, because he keeps staring at you. And I was like, I don't know him. And he was like, okay. So anyway, I start showing him the tapping, and I have him doing the tapping and stimulating the acupressure points. And at the end, I was like, so how do you feel? And he was like, I don't know, kind of weird, kind of different. I'm like, right. Like it just sort of, simmers down your nervous system. And then we start talking about something else. And then he interrupts me. He goes, wait, what did you do to me? Because I don't even want to fight that guy anymore.
I don't want to fight it like you wanted to.
You wanted to fight that?
No. Okay. Thanks
a
for
great red flag for me to know I didn't.
Right? That's why I was like, okay, thank you for telling me so I can get out of there. Oh, that's pretty funny.
But basically, it really can work that fast. I have cleared people's phobias in 15 minutes. I have cleared like traumas in an hour, not big ones. I don't want to like overpromise, but a car accident or an incident where, something happened to a kid, like a one-time incident, and the mom still has reactions about that. We can clear those very quickly. And I'm talking, I have some clients for many years now, and it does not come back. So once that neural pathway is extinguished, it's gone.
As long
And
as you're not fueling it continually. Oh, I did tapping once and now I'm going to go back and just think about this and stew on it and let it come because now I'm fueling that neural pathway back to my emotional side.
yeah.
And so I think that's
And,
really important to distinguish sometimes.
well, and I would say that I don't even know if it's exactly that as much as the analogy we use in tapping is one of tables and legs. And so if you think about your problem as a tabletop, what are the legs? What are the different aspects of that problem that is supporting it, is keeping it there?
Mm,
So if there's just sort of like one big leg and you tap on that one big leg, the whole table might collapse. And so it really will be gone. And that's more like, I actually just saw this kid last week on our spring break trip with my son. When he was 10 years old, he was at my house and he said, I heard that you can do this thing to get rid of fears. Can you help me with my fear of roller coasters? So I tapped with him that day on his fear of roller coasters. And he told me since that day, it never came back. And now
I
he's
love that.
so for simple things, you can tap. It's one leg, it's gone. Most of our problems in life, especially as adults, have multiple legs. But if you think about it, if you tap out 3 of the 4 legs, the table will still collapse. So you don't necessarily need to get at every little aspect, but there might be different ones. And it's very important with tapping. The little saying goes, for results to be terrific, you need to be specific. And so you don't want to just start tapping. I mean, you can tap globally on something like, even though I'm so mad at my ex-spouse or whatever, you could tap globally on that and you might get a little bit of relief. But if you want the real, like life-changing depth of the work of tapping, you're going to tap out each little aspect at a time. So you'd make a list maybe of all the things that are bothering you about, this situation, person,
It's all
problem.
those neural pathways and so when you were saying universal, we're trying to fire a bunch of different things in our brain. It's not going to be as effective versus here's something specific. This
Yeah,
is a specific neural pathway that we are going to starve and
exactly.
redirect.
Right. I say it's like pouring water on a fiery emotion and it just goes out. And it's
Mm,
very cool. It's a very cool physiological feeling when you're really
yes.
tapping on something
And you
and
feel
you,
that.
yes, you feel it. And it's like, to me, it feels like the emotion kind of evaporates out of my body. So people ask me, when do I know that I'm done tapping? I'm like, you will know, if you're really feeling it. The other very important caveat I always have to say to people is, I think so many people out there are, living their life in their heads, right? Very intellectually, and they're trying to solve all their problems in their heads. And it's just, you can't solve a problem from the same place the problem was created. Okay.
Mm,
So it's very important to start to get out of our heads and to start to get in our bodies and feel what we're feeling
mm-hmm.
and really feel it at a biological level and feel, okay, when I think about this, what am I feeling in my body? I'm feeling clenched fists, butterflies in my stomach, tightness in my throat, whatever it might be. And really feel into that and then do the tapping, because the
Mm,
tapping only works on the emotion. If you just have a thought, but you're sort of emotionally cut off from the thought, the tapping, you could tap all day long and it's not going to really get you anywhere. So you have to really be in the feeling state. And so one of the ways we kind of see where people are is a very simple, like, tell me scale 1 to 10, how upsetting is this to you? And so if someone says to me, this is what I want to work on, and I say, okay, let's break it into specifics. Tell me a phrase, like maybe it's, I want to work on why this all my dates go badly. And I'll say, okay, so let's start to break it down. Let's take one date. Let's think of one most recent date and tell me different aspects, different points of that, story, if you will, that experience. And let's start by tapping on one at a time. And so I'll say, okay, with this first one, you said, okay, he showed up and he wasn't chivalrous and that made you really mad on a scale of 1 to 10, how mad? If they say, I don't know, like a 4 or 5, then I'm like, okay, that's not something we want to work with. It's just not enough intensity. So at that point, I'll either have them pick a different aspect, or I'll say, just really drop into your body and really go back to that moment in time and think about, he walked in right in front of you, didn't even hold the door. He sat down, didn't offer to pull out your chair. How were you feeling in that moment? Feel it in your body. Where do you feel it? How strong? Okay, now let's start tapping. And then we start tapping on that. And there's kind of a basic formula. There's the same points you use every time. And all of this is on my website if anyone is interested in learning more. And when you do the points, you basically do a combination of, you say the problem, you just sort of encapsulate it, even though he wasn't chivalrous at all on my date, could be for this example. And then you say some kind of statement of understanding with it, which is just accepting kind of where you are. So I accept that makes me mad still. And so you just say that 3 times on the first point, and then you hit all the other points with what we call the problem statement. So in this case, he was not chivalrous. He was not chivalrous. It made me so mad. He was not chivalrous. And so you go through and you just do that for a round. You stop, you check back in with your number. And let's say it had been an 8 and now it's a 7. Okay, you go back and do it again. Or maybe you pick a slightly different aspect. One thing that's really interesting to me is a lot of times when you start tapping on one feeling, another feeling will come up. So I oftentimes have people say, I'm mad about this at a level 6. And we'll tap on it, and then suddenly tears will spring to their eyes, and they'll say, oh my God, actually, I'm sad. I'm sad because I feel like there's no good men left out there. And the sadness is a level 9. So then the next aspect, the next table leg is the sadness. And so then we'll tap down the sadness. So we just kind of do like that. And it's really one of the things I love so much about EFT tapping, because I feel like I always liked like detective stories when I was a kid. And so it's sort of, I get to do some detective work with my clients, right? Sort of teasing apart what is going on in their subconscious that's really getting in the way of them not getting what they want and not, seeing the world in a way that serves them.
Yeah, slowly uncovering the clues, following it to the big thing that they're experiencing. I feel very similar. I feel like that is that same essence of coaching. Let's uncover what's the next layer, what's that next piece that you are feeling that's pulling you. Where's your belief system? Where's your motivation? Where is your, affirmation need? So very similar to following the clues, different in, I wouldn't even say different in the results, but different reasons that someone would go to psychotherapist versus a coach. I always want to make that separation. I think it's really important that we can in our society. These aren't all, and they work so well together too. But so so you were tapping, you uncovered, I need to write this book. What helped you know what to put in the book? Obviously your own experiences, and then your goddess tribe. I forgot what you called them.
Yeah, exactly.
And just hearing it from other friends and other people that were around, and in a lot of your research. So what are some of the themes that folks can find in the book?
So I realized that a lot of my friends and clients post-divorce were really settling or making excuses for repeating patterns that were so obvious from the outside perspective, but so not obvious to them, or they were just too entrenched in the pattern and clinging to it that they couldn't release it. And I realized that that's all about fear, right? I mean, that's why we cling to things that don't really serve us, is we are afraid. I always think of the analogy, a lot of people use this analogy of like when you're if life is sort of a rushing river and you're clinging to the bank, or you're clinging to a tree branch and you're
Mm.
just hanging on for dear life out of fear, then you're struggling and you're suffering and it's exhausting. But if you can just let go and float and flow with where life takes you, that's oftentimes when you get the good stuff in life. And so I realized that, okay, if everybody going through these post-dating experiences could let go of their fear, I truly believe they would stop settling and they would stop dating these guys that were not good guys or weren't good for them, and they would stop repeating these patterns. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to write this book. And my publishers sort of encouraged us to write it in this way, but for me it was very natural because this was who I was inspired to write the book for in the first place, was to write it as a love letter. She said,
Mm.
write it as a love letter to your ideal reader. And that is what I did. And the ideas honestly did just sort of flow out of me. I had a sort of idea. For instance, I knew I definitely wanted to write about how Cinderella effed me up. It was one of the chapters in my book because I knew there were definitely things that I was very well aware of in my own dating experience that had sort of set me on a not so good path. So I had some things already from myself and some things I had seen from them, and I wanted to put it all in the book. And I'm also like a little bit of a science nerd, as people might have already. So I know a lot about neuroscience, and I wanted to put that in the book, the stuff about the blood flow I just explained, and something else I'll get into, I'm sure, in a second, about our reticular activating system. I think it's just really empowering to have that knowledge of this is not just you feeling overly emotional or being, dramatic or whatever. There is neuroscience to why some of these things are happening in your life or to you, or why you're repeating some of these patterns. And I wanted to put it all together in a way where you could read a chapter, get the principle that I'm teaching, understand the neuroscience behind it. However, I think a lot of books out there do that, and then you still can't really change. So one of the things I struggled with as just sort of a traditional psychotherapist was my clients would get the insight and they would say, oh yes, I see I'm repeating this pattern
They're
because
inspired, they're excited.
right. And then they don't change.
They
So,
don't do the action. They
yes, they
don't
can't
take
pull
that
the trigger.
step. Yes.
Exactly.
I saw someone else was talking about it, and they were um it was like knowledge paralysis, or they called it something. They referred to it. We are full of knowledge, but then we don't actually go and apply that knowledge. So we don't practice. We don't stumble and make mistakes. So then we now can anchor that knowledge in experience and build off of it. It's just floating around. I could, of course, tell you what you should do, but when I can speak from also experience, you're going to listen more, or I'm going to know more what to do next for myself. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Yeah,
and
you're seeing
so
that in clients. I see that in my clients all the time. So I'm like,
all
action,
the
action,
time.
action. We learn from action. So even if you don't have the knowledge, you're going to gain it.
Yes.
So,
Well, and so what I have found is so magical about EFT tapping is it changes that phenomenon
love
very
that.
quickly. So at
Yes.
the end of every chapter, I have a tapping script so you can tap along. So I teach a principle and you get the knowledge, but then in order to take the action,
Get
you
there.
really need to clear whatever it is that's getting in the way of you taking the action. And so that's
Yes.
what each script is, because really, I think most of the time it boils down to fear. So we'll take, for example, the Cinderella chapter. I talk about how I really went out dating with sort of this idea that it was my job to be chosen. And I blame
Oh,
Cinderella for that because I grew up on Disney movies. And
like, here
so,
I am. Come and get
right,
me.
right.
Yes.
It's sort of that visual of the princess at the top of the stairs, and all the women are kind of like elbowing each other out of the way. Pick me, right? And so there was this idea, and I think it's a societally implanted idea in women's heads that you need to be the prettiest, the cutest, the
Mm,
funniest, the whatever, to get a guy to choose you. And it really is such a toxic culture, because it also sets up this that you're in competition with all these other women.
Yes.
And so it's yucky, right? And so then when you go out on dates and you're thinking, I've got to be chosen and I've got to be better than any other woman he's gone out with, you actually come off with this kind of desperate vibe, or this trying too hard. You're definitely not yourself, because you're trying to be what you think he wants you to be, instead of just being yourself. And so the more like goddess vibe perspective is, you are the chooser. You are choosing him just as much as he's choosing you. And a lot of women can see it maybe with like a job interview. You go into a job interview. Yeah, you're hoping they like you, but you're also wanting to know, is this where I want to work? Is this where I want it? But women don't always see it the same in dating. And so when you start to flip that perspective and say, okay, right, that's true. I am the chooser. I do need to. But if you have had your whole life ingrained of showing up, trying to be chosen and getting the guy to like you, quote unquote, it's a very hard habit to break. And that's where the tapping comes in. So you can tap on, even though I'm going to show up as the chooser. It makes me nervous to be the chooser, but I'm going to be the chooser. Because what makes you nervous about it? Well,
what if I choose wrong?
Right. What if you choose wrong? What if he doesn't like that kind of woman, or doesn't like a woman who is, being sort of more in her power? And of course, the answer to that is, well, then he's not your guy.
Exactly. Yes. But
the fear of never being chosen is what keeps women, from continuing in that pattern of acting in a way that is not authentic to themselves most of the time. It's just trying to play a role or play a person that you think the other person wants you to be.
So empowering to, now I have the knowledge. I am getting there with the action, by clearing blockers of my behavior, or not of my belief system. Those blocking, just we can't open up. We can't even see the other side. We don't even know what that looks like, because we're stuck in this one circulating. Wow, I can't even just talk at all today. Circulating belief system of, I'm waiting to be saved. Just come find me. Hopefully the right one finds me, and I'm, just if I'm cute enough, just like you said, pretty enough, or whatever.
That's going to happen. Well, and so it's interesting, because what you're saying about being seen leads right into what I referenced a minute ago, which is this reticular activating system part of our brain.
Yeah.
And this is where it's fascinating, because I do think, like you said at the beginning, people sometimes see the tapping as a little woo-woo or whatnot. And it's actually very much based on what goes on with this reticular activating system, that the clearing of blocks or limiting beliefs is effective. Because here's what happened. Your brain looks for patterns, and then it tries to shortcut by identifying patterns and making it easier for you. And so it's a phenomenon I often talk about that people can relate to, is if you get pregnant and then suddenly you notice there's pregnant women everywhere, and you're like, I never saw many pregnant women before, right? Or for your listeners out there who haven't had that experience, like you decide you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy a Tesla, and all of a sudden you see Teslas everywhere, and you just were like, I didn't realize so many people drove Teslas. Okay, so the same amount of pregnant people and the same amount of Teslas were always there, but you didn't see them, and that's because of this RAS. And so the reticular activating system's job is to filter out things based on your original programming. So if your original programming, for instance, was that your, sort of cliche to say, but it is a common thing, your father was maybe emotionally unavailable, or the main caregiver in your life was emotionally unavailable, hot and cold, something like that. So your brain, your nervous system, identifies feeling love as hot and cold. That's what love feels like to your brain. And so your reticular activating system, when it's looking for your next partner, is going to see those kind of men. It's going to see the hot and cold men, the emotionally unavailable men, and it's going to tell the body, you're supposed to generate love feelings. So you're supposed to create oxytocin in reaction to this because this is our programming. And so when you start tapping on these things, your reticular activating system can suddenly open up and see other guys just the way you can see the car or the pregnant people, so you actually start to see things differently. And I tell a story in the book, which is one of my favorite stories to tell, about a client that I worked with who had been doing a lot of work on herself and had been doing a ton of tapping, ton of clearing, years and years. And she definitely had a pattern of dating not good men and men who didn't treat her well and things like that. And she just couldn't see any other guys. And she lived in a high-rise building, and 8 years into living in that building, after doing tons of work on herself, she suddenly notices this handsome guy in the elevator, and she was like, oh, who's this guy? And they start chatting, and he asks her out, and they start dating. And he's an amazing guy, super, just treats her like an absolute goddess, and is so great to her. They have so much in common. They have so much fun together. He's very handsome. I've seen a picture. And he said to her at one point, I've been seeing you on this elevator or in this building for 8 years, and I always had a crush on you, and you just never gave me the time of day. Until she did, because her brain literally didn't see him. And they definitely were on that same elevator together multiple times over 8 years. So I just love to tell that story because my message is to women that your guy could very well be out there already in your life somewhere close by. But until you do the work, until you start clearing the things that no longer serve you and these old patterns that have been entrenched in your neural pathways, until you start clearing those out, you might not recognize him and you might not feel attraction because you might just have kind of some things off about what feels attractive to you that you just got to clear. And all of it is, I always want to say there's nobody out there who's so damaged that they're beyond help. I think some women think that, and it is so not true. And there's so many advances nowadays with, different mind body techniques. EFT is not the only one. It's just my favorite one, but there's other great ones out there too. EMDR is a really famous one. There's so much out there now to be able to work on and clear these old patterns and to open yourself up to love again, to open up your heart and to be able to take in love and know that you deserve to be a priority. You deserve to be treated like a goddess by your guy. And that there's a lot of men out there who want to treat you that way, who want that for you.
Yes.
And it's there.
And that's what I hear a lot of these dating stories, and it's almost like they're forcing things to happen, or they're really frustrated that this person isn't that person they were hoping that's out there, that magical being that's going to meet all of their needs. And they're frustrated, and then they just either give up or they start dating in a jaded mindset. And then, of course, you're going to be attracting things that are really not going to feel great, people and experiences.
Yeah.
So, and it's not, or I have to be completely healed before I go out.
Yes.
And that's another, I think, misconception of, yes, always work on you. I don't know if there's a point in any of our lives that we are completely healed well beings. We are always striving. It's a journey, definitely not a destination. I know that sounds cliche as well, but I feel like we think the more we are open to those concepts, the happier we are. The more fulfilling, the more things we do see that was a need for me. I never felt that. I never saw that because I was over here telling myself this was my need and not actually, like you said, being in your body. How do I know it's my need? Does it feel good? Right. Do I feel calm when I'm getting that? Or is that just because I saw someone else say that was their need and it sounded nice, and so I just adopted that as my own now?
Right. I'm laughing too because you literally hit on 2 chapters in my book.
Oh.
One is like date for the journey, not the destination.
Oh, I love it.
And the other is you don't have to have all your shit together. Can I say that?
Yeah, yes, of course.
You don't have to have all your shit together before you find love, because I feel like that's actually something that is out there in the culture a lot nowadays. It's sort of a pendulum that has swung.
Yes.
It does bother me because nobody has their shit together. My favorite story is when I first saw Louise Hay. For anyone who doesn't know her, she was sort of known as like the goddess of the founder, if you will, of self-help, right? So was this amazing woman who lived this amazing life. And at 79 years old, I saw her being interviewed by Nick Ortner from the Tapping Solution, and he was teaching her tapping, and she said, "Oh my goodness, Nick, this is amazing. I love it so much. I'm going to use it to work on all my issues from now on." And I thought, oh my God, wait, Louise Hay has issues at 70 years old.
Yeah.
She has done more work on herself than probably any human being on the planet, and she still has issues. But in a way, it was very helpful for me because it sort of put me in check. It made me realize, okay, wait a minute. I've been working so hard on myself to get to this healed place because everyone kept telling me, well, you need to fully love yourself before you can find love again. And I write in my book about, I don't know that anybody fully loves themselves. And so don't fall for that, because I think that blocks women. It makes them feel like they need to just keep working on themselves.
And now they're more unworthy.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It makes me sad. And it also, I think some of the most important work you're going to do on yourself is going to be in your most intimate relationship. And that's okay too. I mean, you don't go into this thing fully healed and find this fully healed person, and then the two of you just are off to the sunset fully healed. Like, that's not life. It's not a thing. So just know that as long as you're working on yourself, and as long as you find someone who is also working on himself and willing to do the work, that's going to be the best match for you. So you guys can do the work together. But yeah, there's no fully healed place. There's no destination. I try to tell my clients, if you can imagine that someone gives you a crystal ball and says 2 years from now, you're going to find your perfect person. But in the meantime, you have to date. You have to date a lot. You have to date around, because every dating experience, every guy you meet, every date you go on, every relationship you have in the meantime is going to help prepare you to call in the one.
That's the action that helps you learn.
Right. And so if you have that attitude that dating is the journey, not the destination, if you really believed in 2 years my person's going to come in, you're going to date from a very different perspective, right? You're not going to show up on every date going like, "Are you the one? Oh, okay, well, maybe you could be the one." To what you were saying earlier, like, kind of, I always say, forcing a round peg in a square hole. Like, you seem to have like 10 of the things on my list, so I'm gonna force it in and make it seem like it's all 20 or whatever it is you have, and so I think if you're just dating from this perspective of, okay, I'm actually only on this date to learn from this guy because I know my guy is coming along later, then you show up very differently. You show up from this more goddess vibe of like, I'm curious what you have to teach me. I'm curious what I'm going to learn from you.
And what I can teach you too, because it's not a take experience. It's an exchange of.
I really appreciate you saying that, actually, because I have had to say that to my clients, because they're saying, well, I sort of feel guilty. And I'm like, no, after every date you write, or every sort of failed, maybe 1, 2, 3 month thing, write down, what did I learn from them? What did I give to them? What did I sort of know upon them, from my goddess.
You are a goddess. Yes, you have gifts that you get to bring to someone.
It can be simple. It can be, I taught them about this wine that they really liked, or this restaurant, or this website, or whatever. Just find a little thing and it makes you feel better. And then when you start dating from that perspective of just showing up open and curious to see what it is they have to teach you, you come across a lot sexier, I can tell you that, than if you show up with a desperate sort of like, are you the one kind of vibe. Yeah, you come in your confidence, in your power, and you are more magnetic and attractive, and you are much more likely to find a guy that actually is going to work for you, that is going, you're much more likely to draw in your right guy from that perspective. So even if you just have to delude yourself a little bit and say, okay, my guy is definitely coming along X day, X time. And so in the meantime, I'm just going to date. You will date from a much better place. You'll enjoy so much more the dating process. I think if you go out there and you're like, oh, it's so frustrating. I have to find a guy. I'm afraid I'm going to grow old alone. I mean, think about all those negative emotions. There's fear. There's frustration. There might be resentment of like, all the guys I've dated so far have sucked, whatever. So if you clear all those negative emotions and just go out with this attitude of, I know I'm a catch. I know I'm a goddess, and I'm just going to see what you have to teach me. And maybe we fit and maybe we don't. And if we don't, I taught you something, you taught me something. And if we do, great.
And to all the guys I've dated out there and your new loved ones, you're welcome. Because I helped to, just kidding. But yeah, it kind of feels like that. It feels like, okay, instead of getting knocked down, you're not the one, or that swiping. I'm kind of like doing that in a swiping manner, right? But we're learning each time we do swipe. Why did I not swipe this way? Or why did I go on a second date? Why didn't I? I'm still learning about me, what I like. I'm still learning to communicate. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think what's really important with that piece right there, what you just said, is to learn from being in your body.
Yes.
Very, very important. So when you're on a date, check in with your body. Are you leaning forward? Are you leaning back? Are you relaxed? Are you tense? Your body is going to give you way more information about whether or not this is the right guy for you than your head ever will. I can promise you that.
Yeah, because your head is going to force that peg into something that doesn't shape, because that is what you want. That's what you're telling yourself. But that subconscious, that body really does hold all the cues, all the clues. If we wanted to start uncovering those, why do I not feel great?
Right.
Why did I leave that date with the worst stomachache ever? I mean, just like feeling icky. I remember so many dates like, this is so funny for me to share. But I would start taking Beano because I was like, is it gas? Is it what I'm eating? Like, I'm so worried. But I would just have upset stomachs. And it wasn't everyone, but it was very, very like, and so I was like, is it something I'm eating? So I seriously was all, and why is it only on dates? I can go out with friends. I can go out with family to restaurants. I've never had this problem. So I'm like trying to like eliminate foods. I'm trying to do all of these things until finally I was like, my body has been trying to tell me something. Mm-hmm. And I have been masking symptoms with medication or trying to remove foods instead of just really embracing like what is going on, what's the activity, who am I with. And it was just one of those things that I was like, I feel like an idiot now that I've realized this because it was so blatantly loud. But it does make me giggle now that I was like, oh no, I have this upset stomach the whole time.
I have a story.
Not sexy. It's not fun.
Right, exactly. And my story is like also a little like embarrassing, if you will, to share. But I had multiple relationships, and now these were longer, like several months kind of relationships, 6 months to a year, whatever, where I had a lot of gynecological issues, like a lot, like chronic yeast infections or whatever it was, ovarian cysts bursting, like weird stuff, like weird and intense. And I sort of started to think with the first relationship where it started happening, where I was like, is my body trying to tell me something? But I was like, no, I love this guy. That's not it. And then, eventually when all that unraveled, and then the next guy I dated, I started getting these chronic yeast infections, and I was like, oh no. And then, but I still ignored it for a few months. And then finally I was like, no, my body's trying to tell me something. And then a third time when it started happening, I was like, okay, wrong guy, I'm out, so I started listening to my body more. But I thought that was pretty fascinating that my body was talking to me in that very specific way. The
body keeps the score. If those who are interested in reading more about that, there's a book Yes. And it really does tell you we have all the clues. We just need to see them, listen, and be aware. And if we have those blockers, we have avenues to get us more aware of what's going on. But Allison, for those who are in this dating stage or have friends who are, experiencing some of these, they see some of those patterns, where can they find you, your book, and all of that information?
They can find me at learntodatelakeagoddess.com. And right now, I'm offering something special for your listeners. If they go to my website, they can sign up and get a free ebook copy of my book, and
Wow.
they can get that downloaded to their email. So for anyone who's interested in, likes to hold a book, it is available on Amazon. Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. But if you're interested and you just want to download it right now and get reading, I explain in there exactly what tapping is, how to do it. I do kind of walk you through it, so don't worry about that piece. And then, like I said, every chapter you get a little tapping script. And I can tell you a fun story that a friend of mine actually, who read the advanced reader copy right before I published, she tells this story that she had been coming to her therapist's office for several months at that point, complaining every time, there's no good guys out there. It's hopeless. It's endless. I'm never going to find a guy. And then she walked in the week after reading my book, and she sat down on the couch and she said, "Oh my God, okay, I have 5 dates this week and they're all good guys. And I don't know what to do because I don't know how to choose and decide between them." And the therapist said to her, "Whoa, whoa, 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 back up, back up. You've literally been complaining on my couch for months that there's no good guys out there. And in 1 week you got 5 dates." And she said, "Huh. Yeah, you're right." She's like, "Well, I read my friend's book and I did this tapping, and then I don't know, I all of a sudden met this guy in yoga, and I saw this guy there, and I saw someone online that looked interesting." So her reticular activating system started firing up and seeing all these different guys, and her being more in her goddess vibe was more magnetic to these guys. So they came up to her, approached her, and asked her out. So it's true story. And I hope it gives hope out there to anyone who is frustrated or feeling down about dating at this point, because you can turn it all around like that.
Thank you so much for that resource, for hearing that call for you and listening to that call of, I need to write this book and serve this group of people who typically feel helpless, hopeless, frustrated, and are stuck in those patterns, right? We can remove ourselves, we can grow, we can move beyond. And it's really exciting. And it's not the dating pool. It's not the dating pool. I know that's all a big one we love to blame. There's plenty of people getting divorces out there. So there's plenty.
You just need one. You don't need a ton. You just need one. So he's out there.
Very much appreciate you coming on this show, and everyone who's tuning in, thank you so much for your support. If you want to find out more, you can always visit us at saltysexcast.com. Send us a message there. We have all of our episodes and even fun swag and all of that. So thank you all, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Salty Sexcast. Ready for round 2? Find us on Facebook.